Commander Lara Kutol stood at the observation deck of the research vessel Stellar Seeker, her iridescent scales shifting colors with anticipation as Earth's blue-green sphere filled the viewport. After 6 cycles of deep space travel, the Research Alliance's most ambitious linological study was about to begin. Final approach vectors locked, announced First Officer Ven, her tentacles gracefully manipulating the holographic controls. Atmospheric entry in 30 minutes. Lara's secondary hearts fluttered. This mission would make or break her career. The Research Alliance had never attempted such close observation of a pre-contact species. Everything they knew about humans came from long-range scans and intercepted broadcasts. Now they would study them up close. Review mission parameters, Lyra ordered, addressing her team of 5 female researchers gathered on the bridge. One last time. Dr. Mira, the xenobiologist, stepped forward. Her crystalline exoskeleton caught the starlight as she projected a hologram of the human form. Subject species demonstrates remarkable adaptability despite lacking basic evolutionary advantages. No natural armor, minimal sensory capacity, inefficient bipedal locomotion. Yet they've achieved industrial civilization. And continue to advance rapidly, added Dr. Senna, the cultural specialist. Her feathered crest rose with excitement. Their technological progress in the last century alone is unprecedented. The Research Alliance wants to understand how. Which is why we're here, Lyra said. But remember the prime directive, absolute non-interference. We observe only. No contact with the subjects under any circumstances. The ship shuddered as it hit the outer atmosphere. Through the viewport, the black of space began giving way to blue. Lyra watched her team take their positions, each activating their personal cloaking fields. The technology would bend light around them, rendering them invisible to human eyes and most scanning equipment. Landing zone identified, Ven reported. Unpopulated area, heavy forest cover, minimal satellite surveillance. The ship descended through layers of clouds, its own cloaking field ensuring it appeared as nothing more than atmospheric disturbance to human monitoring systems. Lyra felt her scales ripple with anticipation. Years of preparation had led to this moment. As they broke through the cloud cover, Earth's surface came into sharp focus. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The sheer abundance of life was overwhelming. Unlike their homeworld's carefully managed ecosystems, Earth was a riot of uncontrolled biological processes. Trees of various species grew in seeming chaos. Insects buzzed through the air. Small animals scurried through undergrowth. Life signs approaching, Dr. Mira announced suddenly. 2 humans, moving along what appears to be a designated recreation path. Perfect, Lyra said. Deploy observation drones. Let's see what we're dealing with. The team watched intently as the drone feeds appeared on their monitors. 2 humans, 1 male, 1 female by their dimorphic characteristics, were walking along a dirt path engaged in social behavior. Their external coverings were brightly colored, their exposed skin glistening slightly in the sunlight. Fascinating, Dr. Mira murmured, her sensors working overtime. Their temperature regulation is remarkably inefficient. They're actually secreting water to cool themselves. Look at their locomotion, Dr. Senna added. Such a waste of energy, balancing on just 2 limbs. Yet they make it look almost graceful. Lyra studied the humans with growing interest. Everything about them seemed to defy conventional evolutionary logic. Their bodies were soft and vulnerable, their senses limited, their physical capabilities unremarkable. Yet they had not only survived but thrived, spreading across their planet and reaching for the stars. Commander, Ven called out suddenly. I'm detecting elevated electromagnetic emissions from the human female's personal device. She appears to be using it to capture images of the surrounding area. Adjust our cloaking field frequency, Lyra ordered. We can't risk showing up in their primitive recording devices. The humans passed by, oblivious to the invisible observers studying their every move. Their voices carried clearly through the ship's sensors, speaking one of Earth's dominant languages. The diversity of communication methods is remarkable, Dr. Senna noted. Not just verbal, but subtle shifts in facial musculature, body positioning, pheromone release, all conveying different layers of meaning. But look at the inefficiency, Dr. Mira countered. So much room for misinterpretation. How do they maintain social cohesion? Laura watched as the humans stopped to examine a flowering plant. The female crouched down, reaching out to touch the delicate petals. Such casual interaction with unknown organisms would be unthinkable on their homeworld. Yet these humans showed no fear, only curiosity. Perhaps that's their greatest strength, Lyra mused aloud. They don't let their limitations define them. Where we see inefficiency, they see opportunity. Where we see risk, they see possibility. The day continued with more observations as humans came and went along the trail. Each encounter revealed new puzzles. Their social structures seemed simultaneously rigid and flexible. Their technology was primitive yet innovative. Their bodies were fragile yet remarkably resilient. As Earth's sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, Laura called her team together for their first mission report. Initial observations have raised more questions than answers, she admitted. But one thing is clear, we've underestimated these humans. Their apparent weaknesses mask remarkable strengths. Should we revise our research parameters? Dr. Mira asked. Perhaps closer observation walled. No, Lyra cut her off firmly. We maintain protocol. Observe only. No matter how fascinating they may be, we cannot risk contaminating their natural development. But as she looked out at the darkening earth forest, Lara couldn't shake the feeling that maintaining distance from these intriguing creatures would prove harder than any of them had anticipated. There was something about humans that drew you in, made you want to understand them better. Tomorrow we begin detailed physiological and sociological scanning, she announced. Let's find out what makes these remarkable beings tick. As her team dispersed to their rest pods, Lara remained at the viewport, watching the lights of a distant human settlement twinkle through the trees. She had come seeking scientific knowledge, but she was beginning to suspect this mission would teach them all far more than they had bargained for. The question was, would they be able to maintain their professional distance, or would humanity's mysterious allure prove too strong to resist? Only time would tell. For now, they had a mission to complete and protocols to follow. But as Laura finally turned away from the viewport, she couldn't help but wonder what other surprises these fascinating humans had in store for them. Dawn broke over the research site as the Stellar Seeker team entered their second phase of observation. Commander Lyra reviewed the previous day's data, her scales shifting to a deep blue of concentration. Something about these humans wasn't adding up. Dr. Mira, report, she called to her xenobiologist, who was hunched over a complex array of scanning equipment. Commander, you need to see this, Mira responded, her crystalline structure vibrating with excitement. These humans, they're rewriting everything we thought we knew about adaptation. The holographic display lit up, showing detailed scans of human cellular structure. Look here, Mira pointed with a delicate crystalline appendage. Their bodies are constantly changing, adapting in real time to environmental stresses. Impossible, First Officer Venn interjected, her tentacles curling skeptically. No species can modify its biological structure that quickly. Yet they do, Mira insisted. Watch this time-lapse from our human subject exercising yesterday. The display showed microscopic views of human muscle tissue, rebuilding and strengthening itself after stress. Blood vessels expanded and contracted, oxygen delivery systems optimized themselves, even neural pathways reorganized. They're like living laboratories, Mira breathed in wonder. Each individual constantly experimenting, adapting, evolving. A sudden alert from their perimeter sensors interrupted the discussion. Dr. Senna's feathered crest rose in alarm as she checked the readings. Commander, we have an unexpected situation. A human child has wandered into our observation zone. Lyra rushed to the viewport. Sure enough, a small human female, no more than 7 Earth years by their estimates, was picking her way through the underbrush. She was alone, a situation that cultural research suggested was unusual. Life signs, Lyra demanded. Elevated heart rate, slight dehydration, Mira reported. She appears to be lost. The team watched in tense silence as the child moved closer to their cloaked ship. Protocol was clear, absolutely no interference. But something in the child's frightened expression tugged at Lyra's secondary hearts. She's scared, Dr. Senna observed softly. In their culture, children this age are still heavily dependent on adult protection. The girl stumbled, scraping her knee on a rock. The teen watched in fascination as tiny blood vessels immediately began the repair process, while tears, another uniquely human response, streamed down her face. "Commander," Ven said quietly, "if we maintain position, she'll likely make physical contact with the ship's cloaking field." Lyra's scales rippled with indecision. The mission protocols were absolute, but they hadn't accounted for a situation like this. Before she could respond, new voices echoed through the forest, adult humans calling a name. The child's head snapped up, hope replacing fear on her remarkably expressive face. "Over here," she shouted, her high-pitched voice carrying through the trees. The teen watched as 2 adult humans, presumably the child's parents, burst into the clearing. The reunion that followed was a fascinating display of human emotional bonds, full of embraces, tears, and rapid vocalizations. "Look at their hormone levels," Mira murmured, monitoring her instruments. Oxytocin, dopamine, cortisol all shifting in complex patterns. Their biochemical responses are as sophisticated as their technological ones. As the human family departed, Lyra called an emergency team meeting. "Today's events have highlighted a crucial oversight in our mission parameters," she began. "We're not just studying their biology or technology, we're studying a species with deep emotional complexity." "Their emotional responses seem inefficient," Ven noted, "the energy expended on crying alone." "But look at the results," Senna interrupted, her crest bristling with excitement. "Those emotional bonds drive their development, their innovation, their resilience. It's not a weakness, it's the source of their strength." The discussion continued late into the night. The more they learned about humans, the more fascinating they became. Their bodies might be fragile, but they compensated with incredible adaptability. Their emotions might seem chaotic, but they fueled remarkable achievements. "We need to adjust our approach," Lyra finally decided. "Maintain the non-interference protocol, but expand our observation parameters. I want to understand not just how they survive, but how they thrive." The next few days brought a flood of new discoveries. They observed humans engaged in what they called sports, deliberately stressing their bodies to trigger adaptation. They watched them create art, transforming abstract emotions into tangible forms. They studied their social interactions, marveling at the complex web of relationships that seemed to sustain them. But it was their response to failure that proved most intriguing. Where other species might retreat from difficulty, humans seemed to draw strength from it. Every setback became a challenge to overcome, every obstacle a puzzle to solve. "They're teaching me something new about resilience," Mira admitted one evening, reviewing her data. "Their adaptability isn't just physical, it's psychological, emotional, cultural." Lyra nodded, but a growing concern nagged at her. The more they learned about humans, the harder it became to maintain professional distance. She caught her team members lingering over individual subjects, developing what almost seemed like attachment to these fascinating creatures. The situation came to a head when they observed a human male attempting something their calculations said was impossible, scaling a sheer rock face with minimal equipment. By all their models, he should have failed. Instead, they watched in amazement as he persevered, his body and mind working in harmony to overcome every challenge. "Commander," Dr. Senna said quietly as they watched the human finally reach his goal, "I believe we need to consider something radical. What if our mission's greatest value isn't in what we learn about humans, but in what they could teach us? It was a dangerous thought, one that brushed against the very edges of their mission parameters. But as Lyra watched the humans stand triumphant atop the cliff, she couldn't dismiss it entirely. "Love that observation, Doctor," she said finally. "But remember, we're here to observe, not interact, no matter how inspiring they might be." Yet as she retired to her rest pod that night, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that maintaining that professional distance was becoming increasingly impossible. Humans, it seemed, had a way of making you question everything you thought you knew, even the most fundamental protocols of xenological research. The real question was, how long could they keep watching without wanting to reach out and connect with these remarkable beings? As she drifted off to sleep, Laura suspected they would find out sooner rather than later. 3 weeks into their mission, a series of events shattered the fragile balance the research team had maintained. It began with what should have been a routine observation session at a human research facility they'd discovered near their landing site. Commander Lyra watched through their advanced surveillance systems as a young human scientist worked late into the night. Dr. Sarah Chen, according to the facility's records they discreetly accessed, was conducting research on environmental restoration techniques. "Fascinating approach," Dr. Mira commented, her crystalline form gleaming in the dim light of their observation deck. "She's attempting to engineer bacteria to clean polluted water systems. Primitive methods, but the underlying theory is sound." Lyra noted how the human scientist's hands shook with exhaustion as she peered into her microscope. For the past week, they'd observed her working well beyond normal human operational hours, driven by what appeared to be pure determination. Her vital signs indicate severe fatigue, First Officer Venn reported, tentacles twitching with concern. "This level of self-stress is consistent with what humans call pushing themselves too hard." Dr. Senna's feathers rustled as she studied her cultural analysis displays. She's working against a deadline. The facility's funding is being cut. Without a breakthrough, her entire research project will be terminated. The team had grown oddly invested in Sarah's work, perhaps because, despite her primitive tools, she was pursuing goals similar to their own society's environmental preservation efforts. They watched as she rubbed her eyes, checked another sample, and slumped in disappointment. "There's a flaw in her base calculations," Mira said suddenly, her crystalline fingers tracing equations in the air. "If she adjusted the bacterial genome sequencing just slightly, but she can't see it with their limited equipment." "We cannot interfere," Lyra stated firmly, though her scales rippled with empathy. "The protocol." A sudden alarm cut through the ship's quiet observation mode. "Multiple human life signs approaching," Venn announced. "Security personnel. They're sealing the laboratory." Through their monitors, they watched as uniformed humans entered Sarah's lab. Despite her protests, they began shutting down equipment and sealing samples. The research team could only observe as months of the human scientist's work was systematically dismantled. "They can't do this," Sarah's voice came clearly through their audio feeds. "Please, I'm so close to a breakthrough. Just give me a few more days." "Orders are orders," Dr. Chen, one of the security officers, replied. "Funding's been reallocated. Lab needs to be cleared by morning." After the security team left, Sarah remained, standing amid her partially dismantled lab. The research team watched in fascination as she exhibited classic human emotional responses: tears, elevated heart rate, stress hormones flooding her system. But then something else happened. Her posture straightened, her jaw set in what the cultural database identified as determination. Instead of leaving, she turned back to her workstation and began rapidly transferring data to a portable device. "She's not giving up," Dr. Senna observed, her crest rising in admiration. "Even now, she's looking for a way to continue." What happened next would be hotly debated in the ship's logs for days to come. Sarah, in her haste to save her research, knocked over a rack of critical samples. Glass shattered. Potentially hazardous bacteria cultures began seeping across the floor. Containment breach, Mira reported urgently. Those bacteria strains, combined with the lab's other compounds. Commander, the reaction could be toxic. Sarah had apparently reached the same conclusion. They watched her scramble for protective equipment, but she was too slow. The fumes were already rising. She'll lose consciousness in approximately 30 seconds, Ven calculated. Hospital response time to this facility is 15 minutes. Lyra felt her scales shift to the deep purple of decision. Dr. Mira, prepare a neutralizing agent. Ven, bring us in close. Senna, ready the medical scanner. Commander, Ven's tentacles writhed in agitation. The protocol. The protocol never accounted for this. Lyra cut her off. Sometimes the right thing transcends protocol. Moving with practiced efficiency despite their moral turmoil, the team maneuvered their ship next to the laboratory window. Lyra herself, protected by her environmental suit, phased through the cloaking field and entered the lab. Sarah was already unconscious when Lyra reached her. Moving quickly, she administered the neutralizing agent to the spilled cultures while Mira, following her in, used their advanced medical technology to stabilize the human's condition. Life signs stabilizing, Mira reported. But Commander, she saw us. Before she lost consciousness, she saw us. Lyra looked down at the unconscious scientist, her scales shifting through patterns of concern and resignation. Then we better make sure she understands. When Sarah regained consciousness, she found herself not in a hospital, but in a softly lit room that defied terrestrial architecture. Her first sight was Lyra, standing at a respectful distance, scales glowing gently in the dim light. Try to remain calm, Lyra said, the translation matrix converting her speech to perfect Mandarin, Sarah's first language. You're safe, Dr. Chen. We've neutralized the toxic compounds and treated your exposure. To the research team's surprise, Sarah's first response wasn't fear. Her eyes, though wide, showed primarily curiosity. You're not human, she managed, her voice hoarse. No, Lyra confirmed. We're researchers, like you. We've been studying your species, learning about your remarkable adaptability and determination. Sarah slowly sat up, her scientific training apparently overriding any instinctive fear. All this time, we weren't alone. We revealed ourselves to save your life, Lyra explained. It was a violation of our protocols, but sometimes the right thing transcends protocol, Sarah finished, showing that remarkable human intuition. Lyra's scales shifted to a surprised pink. Yes, exactly. Over the next few hours, as Sarah recovered, an unprecedented exchange of knowledge took place. The human scientist, far from being traumatized by her close encounter, asked countless questions about their technology, their society, their research. Your bacterial purification theories were sound, Mira told her, sharing their analysis. You just needed more precise genome sequencing tools. Tools you have, Sarah noted, her eyes gleaming with possibilities. Before they could stop her, she'd pulled out her notebook and was sketching adaptations of their techniques that could work with Earth's current technology level. The team watched in amazement as she essentially reverse-engineered advanced concepts into something her society could actually produce. This is why we study you, Lyra said softly. This adaptability, this ability to bridge impossible gaps with sheer determination and creativity. As the night wore on, however, reality began to set in. What happens now? Sarah asked finally. I mean, I've seen you. I know you exist. Isn't that a problem? Lyra's scales shifted through various colors as she considered their options. Protocol dictated memory erasure, but something about that felt wrong now. They'd crossed a line saving her life. Perhaps it was time to acknowledge that the line needed to be crossed. Now, Lyra said, making a decision that would change both their worlds. We talk about the future, because I think both our species have a lot to learn from each other. As she spoke those words, Lyra knew their mission had irrevocably changed. But looking at Sarah's eager expression, Seeing the possibilities that lay in collaboration rather than mere observation, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. The question was, how would both their societies react to this unauthorized first contact? That was a challenge they would have to face together. The situation aboard the Stellar Seeker had become increasingly tense in the days following their intervention with Sarah Chen. Commander Lyra found herself dealing with a deeply divided crew while trying to manage their growing relationship with the human scientist. "This is madness," First Officer Ven declared during their morning briefing, her tentacles writhing with agitation. "We've gone from passive observation to active collaboration. The Research Alliance will have our crystalline formations for this." "The Alliance doesn't understand what we've discovered," Dr. Mira countered, her crystalline structure vibrating with excitement. "Sarah's adaptations of our purification techniques, they're brilliant. She's accomplished in days what would take our engineers cycles to consider." Lyra's scales shifted through patterns of concern as she reviewed the latest data. Sarah had indeed proven to be an invaluable collaborator, finding innovative ways to simplify their advanced technologies into forms that could work with Earth's current technological level. But every interaction with her increased their risk of discovery. "Commander," Dr. Senna interrupted, her feathers bristling with alarm. "We have a situation. Multiple human vehicles approaching Sarah's laboratory." The view screen showed several black automobiles with government markings surrounding the facility. Men in dark suits were emerging, carrying sophisticated scanning equipment. "They're detecting residual energy signatures from our intervention," Ven reported grimly. "Our cloaking technology leaves traces their primitive devices shouldn't be able to detect, but humans have a way of exceeding expectations," Lyra finished. "Alert Sarah immediately." They watched through their monitors as Sarah received their warning through the secure communication device they'd given her. She calmly began deleting files and destroying samples that might reveal their existence, maintaining an impressive appearance of normalcy as government agents entered her lab. Dr. Chen, a stern-faced man in a black suit, approached her. "I'm Agent Morris, National Security Agency. We need to discuss some unusual energy readings we detected from your facility." Sarah's heart rate elevated. Her voice remained steady. "Energy readings? I'm afraid I don't understand. My work involves bacterial culture research." "We both know there's more to it than that," Morris replied, producing a tablet displaying complex scanning data. "These patterns match nothing in our database. Care to explain?" The research team watched in growing concern as Sarah was questioned. She maintained her composure admirably, deflecting questions and providing plausible explanations for the anomalous readings. But the agents weren't leaving. "They're setting up permanent monitoring equipment," Ven reported, "and I'm detecting communications with orbital satellites. They're redirecting surveillance coverage to this area." Lyra felt her scales darken with worry. This was exactly the scenario their non-interference protocols were designed to prevent. Human authorities were now aware something unusual was happening, and they wouldn't stop until they found answers. "Commander," Dr. Mira spoke up hesitantly, "there's something else. Sarah's original research, the bacterial purification project. The solutions she developed using our insights, they could save millions of human lives." "And expose us in the process," Ven countered. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing anymore," Dr. Senna suggested, her crest rising. "We've seen how humans handle challenges, how they adapt and grow. Perhaps it's time for controlled contact." Before Lyra could respond, new alarms blared through the ship. "Multiple aircraft approaching," Ven announced. "Military grade. They're establishing a search pattern." "They're looking for us," Lyra realized. Their window of opportunity was closing fast. Then Sarah's voice came through their secure channel, barely a whisper as she pretended to work at her station. "They're not going to stop, and I can't protect this research forever. We need to make a decision. Either we destroy everything and disappear, leaving Earth's water crisis unsolved, or we change everything," Lyra finished, her scales shifting through complex patterns as she considered their options. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Military helicopters circled the area while government agents combed through Sarah's research. The stellar seeker remained safely cloaked, but Lyra knew it was only a matter of time before human determination found a way to detect them. "Commander." Ven approached, her tentacles unusually still. "I've been analyzing human response patterns to first contact scenarios from their entertainment media." "Fiction isn't fact," Lyra reminded her. "No, but it reveals their hopes and fears, and in nearly every scenario, secrecy and shadows lead to fear and conflict, but open, peaceful contact, especially when offering solutions to global problems." Lyra studied the data Ven had compiled. The patterns were clear. Humans responded better to transparency than secrecy, to cooperation than confrontation. "Dr. Senna," she called, "begin preparing a first contact protocol. Dr. Mira, compile all our collaborative research with Sarah. Focus on immediate benefits to human society. Then, calculate our best approach for open contact that won't trigger their defense systems." "You're really doing this?" Sarah's whispered voice came through their comm. "Going public." "We're adapting," Lyra replied, her scales shimmering with determination. "It's something we learned from you humans." The next 12 hours were crucial. While Sarah kept the government agents occupied, the Stellar Seeker's crew prepared for humanity's first official alien contact. They compiled data, prepared demonstrations of their peaceful intentions, and most importantly, gathered evidence of how their technology could help solve Earth's environmental crisis. "Multiple world leaders are now involved," Ven reported. "They're gathering for an emergency session of the United Nations." "Perfect," Lyra said. "That's our target audience." The plan they devised was both simple and audacious. They would reveal themselves not through military channels or secret government contacts, but through a public demonstration of their environmental purification technology, broadcast simultaneously to the UN Assembly and global media. "Humans respond to hope," Dr. Senna had explained. "Show them we come with solutions, not threats." As they made their final preparations, Lyra received an unexpected transmission from Sarah. "Whatever happens," the human scientist said, "thank you. You showed me that the impossible just needs a new perspective." "No," Lyra replied, her scales glowing warmly. "You showed us that progress requires courage to break old patterns. We came to study humanity, but you've taught us more than we could have imagined." As dawn broke over the research facility, Lyra gathered her crew for one final briefing. "What we're about to do violates every protocol in our mission," she acknowledged. "But sometimes the greatest discoveries require us to write new protocols." The Stellar Seeker hummed with energy as they prepared to reveal themselves to humanity. Whatever came next would change both their worlds forever. But looking at her crew's determined faces, at the trust in Sarah's eyes through their video link, Lyra knew they were ready. Sometimes the most important scientific discoveries weren't found in laboratories or field observations, but in the connections made between different worlds and ways of thinking. They had come to study humanity's adaptability, and in the process, learn to adapt themselves. As they initiated their revelation sequence, Lyra's scales shifted to a brilliant, hopeful blue. The real experiment was just beginning. The United Nations General Assembly Hall buzzed with tension as world leaders gathered for what they'd been told was an unprecedented emergency session. None of them knew they were about to witness the most significant moment in human history. Commander Lyra stood in the Stellar Seeker's command center, her scales shifting through patterns of anticipation as they finalized their preparations. Dr. Sarah Chen was already inside the UN building, having been rushed there by government officials still trying to understand the strange readings from her laboratory. "All systems ready," First Officer Ven reported, her tentacles moving with precise efficiency across the control panels. "Global broadcast networks are in position, though they don't know why." "Dr. Mira," Lyra called, status of the demonstration. The crystalline xenobiologist gestured to a series of containment fields holding samples of polluted water from various Earth locations. "Purification systems are primed. The results should be convincing. They'll need to be, Dr. Sen added, her feathers rippling with nervous energy. Human history suggests they respond better to practical demonstrations and theoretical discussions. The ship's cloaking field hummed as they maneuvered into position above the UN building. Below them, security forces were scrambling, their sensors detecting something but unable to identify what. Military jets circled at a distance, weapons armed, but holding fire without a clear target. "It's time," Lyra announced. "Dr. Chen, are you ready?" Through their secure link, Sarah's voice came clear and steady. "Ready, though I still think you should let me warn them first." "No," Lyra replied, her scales shifting to a determined blue. "Human psychology data suggests they need to see us all at once. No secrets, no shadows, complete transparency." With a command from Lyra, the operation began. First, the technology interfaced with the UN's communication systems, overriding the normal feeds with their own broadcast. On screens around the world, regular programming dissolved into a single unified transmission. "People of Earth," Lyra's voice echoed through the General Assembly Hall, translated simultaneously into every human language. "We come to you not in shadows, but in light, not with demands, but with offers of cooperation." The Stellar Seeker's cloaking field deactivated, revealing their crystalline ship hovering above the UN building. Inside the hall, diplomatic chaos erupted as delegates realized they were witnessing first contact. "Security teams are mobilizing," Ven reported tensely. "Proceed as planned," Lyra ordered. "Dr. Chen, you're up." Sarah stood from her seat among the confused delegates, moving to the central podium. Her voice, though shaking slightly, carried clearly through the stunned silence. "Distinguished delegates, my name is Dr. Sarah Chen. For the past week, I've been working with these visitors from the stars. They call themselves the Research Alliance, and they're here to help." The demonstration began. On the massive screens around the hall, they showed the process of their advanced purification technology cleaning Earth's polluted waters. Rivers choked with industrial waste ran clear. Dead zones in the oceans sparked with renewed life. "This is just the beginning," Sarah continued, gaining confidence as she spoke. "Their technology, adapted to work with our current capabilities, could solve our environmental crisis within a decade. And they're offering it freely, asking only for scientific cooperation in return." Lyra watched the human responses carefully. Fear, yes, but also hope. Suspicion, but also curiosity. And most importantly, she saw the spark of determination that had first drawn them to study humanity, that drive to reach for the impossible. The next phase was critical. With careful precision, the Stellar Seeker landed in the plaza outside the UN building. Lyra led her team out, their alien forms revealed to humanity for the first time. She could hear the gasps, see the phones recording every moment, feel the weight of history in the making. "We came to study you," Lyra announced, her scales glowing with sincerity. "To understand how a species with so many seeming limitations could achieve so much. What we found was not weakness, but strength, not limitation, but endless adaptability." Inside the UN, delegates were already forming into groups, discussing, debating. Security forces maintained their distance, weapons lowered but ready. Media networks broadcast every moment to a world holding its collective breath. "Your Dr. Chen showed us something vital," Lara continued. "When our advanced technology met human innovation, both were improved. You see possibilities where we see problems. You find ways to adapt, to overcome, to grow." Dr. Mira stepped forward, presenting detailed data on their collaborative research. Dr. Senna shared cultural analysis showing the benefits of cooperation. Even Ven, who had been most skeptical, offered tactical assessments proving they posed no threat. Hours passed in intense negotiation. Questions were asked and answered. Fears were addressed. Possibilities were explored. Through it all, Sarah stood with the alien team, bridging the gap between worlds, showing through her own example that cooperation was possible. "Commander," Ven reported quietly, "I'm detecting multiple transmissions from our homeworld. The Research Alliance has noticed our revelation." Lyra's scales rippled with acknowledgement. She had known this would come. That actions today hadn't just changed Earth's future, they had altered their own society's path as well. "Let them come," she said. "Let them see what we've seen. Let them understand what we've learned about the power of breaking old barriers." As Earth's sun began to set, casting long shadows across the UN plaza, the first framework of an agreement was reached. The Research Alliance would share their environmental restoration technology, while humanity would offer their unique perspectives and innovation. "It won't be easy," Sarah said privately to Lyra as they watched humans and aliens beginning to interact more freely. "There will be fear, resistance, setbacks." "Of course," Lyra replied, her scales shifting to a pattern of amusement. "But if there's one thing we've learned about humans, it's that you thrive on challenges." Looking out at the mixing of their species, at the barriers already beginning to fall, Lyra felt her scientific curiosity surge anew. They had come to study humanity's adaptability. Now they will experience it firsthand as both their worlds adapted to this new reality. The real experiment was just beginning, and for the first time in her career, Lyra couldn't predict the outcome. Somehow, that felt exactly right. 3 months after the historic revelation at the UN, Commander Lyra stood in the newly established Joint Research Center, watching humans and members of the Research Alliance working side by side. Her scales shimmered with satisfaction as she observed Dr. Sarah Chen explaining Earth's unique atmospheric composition to a group of fascinated alien scientists. Another Research Alliance ship just entered orbit. First Officer Ven reported, her tentacles moving gracefully over a holographic display. "That makes 15 now. Apparently, we're not the only ones fascinated by human potential." The changes had come faster than anyone expected. After the initial shock of first contact wore off, humanity had demonstrated their remarkable adaptability once again. Within weeks, international frameworks for cooperation were established. Scientific exchange programs began. Cultural barriers started breaking down. "Commander," Dr. Mira called excitedly, her crystalline form catching the morning sunlight. "You need to see this. The humans have already improved our water purification technology." Lyra moved to the research station where Sarah and her team had been working. The display showed a modified version of their original system, but with distinctly human innovations. Where the Alliance's approach had been precise and resource-intensive, the humans had found ways to achieve similar results with simpler, more accessible methods. "We were overthinking it," Mira admitted, her structure vibrating with excitement. Their crude technology forced them to find creative solutions we never considered. "That's humanity's greatest strength," Sarah added, joining them at the display. "We're used to working with limitations. It makes us think differently." The center's alert system suddenly chimed, indicating an incoming priority transmission from the Research Alliance High Council. Lyra's scales shifted to a more formal pattern as she accepted the call. The holographic form of High Counselor Vex materialized, their crystalline structure gleaming with authority. "Commander Lyra, your latest progress report is intriguing." "Thank you, High Counselor," Lyra responded carefully. Though the Council had ultimately approved their contact with Earth, there was still debate about how quickly to proceed with integration. "These humans," Vex continued, "they've already adapted our environmental restoration technology for use in their Mars colonization project." "Yes," Sarah stepped forward, earning a surprised shimmer from the counselor. "By combining your purification systems with our terraform modeling, we believe we can accelerate Mars' atmospheric conversion by several centuries." Vex's crystalline form shifted through patterns of deep thought. "And this is just one project among many." "Indeed," Lyra confirmed proudly. "Human scientists are currently collaborating with our teams on everything from quantum computing to biological adaptation." Their unique perspective has already led to several breakthrough discoveries. The real breakthrough, though, wasn't just scientific. Laura watched as humans and aliens worked together, sharing jokes, exchanging stories, building bridges between their cultures. What had started as a research mission had evolved into something far more profound. There have been concerns, Vex noted carefully, about the speed of this integration. Some feel we're moving too quickly, but humans aren't ready for full partnership with the Alliance. Before Lyra could respond diplomatically, Sarah spoke up again. With respect, High Counselor, humanity has been ready for this moment for generations. We've dreamed of it, prepared for it, hoped for it. Yes, we're moving quickly, but that's because we've been waiting for this opportunity for so long. Vex's form shimmered with surprise at the human's directness. But then, something remarkable happened. The crystalline structure shifted to a pattern Lyra recognized as amusement. Perhaps, the counselor said, this is why Commander Lyra's team was right to break protocol. Your species continues to surprise us, Dr. Chen. After the transmission ended, Lyra found herself reflecting on how much had changed. The Research Alliance had come to study human adaptability, but in the process, they'd been forced to adapt themselves. Commander, Ven called out suddenly, we're detecting unusual energy readings from Laboratory 7. In the lab, they found a human teenager, part of the new Youth Science Exchange program, working with one of their quantum physicists. The energy readings were coming from what appeared to be a heavily modified Alliance device. What exactly are you doing? Lyra asked, her scales shifting between curiosity and concern. The teenage girl, Amy Zhang, looked up with enthusiasm. We're testing a new approach to quantum entanglement. Your systems are amazing, but they're built around crystalline thinking patterns. We wondered what would happen if we introduced more chaos into the equation. The Alliance scientist, despite looking somewhat frazzled, nodded in agreement. Their unpredictability, it's opening up entirely new possibilities we never considered. This, Lyra realized, was the true gift humanity offered to the galaxy. Not just their adaptability or determination, but their ability to see things differently, to challenge established patterns, to find new paths forward. As the day drew to a close, Lyra stood with Sarah on the center's observation deck, watching the sunset paint a sky and colors that still amazed her alien eyes. Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this? Sarah asked. When you first came to study us. Lyra's scales shifted through patterns of reflection. We came seeking to understand how humans compensate for their physical limitations. Instead, you showed us that what we saw as limitations were actually advantages. Your so-called weaknesses forced you to become strong in ways we never considered. And now? Sarah smiled. Now we're all adapting together, Lyra replied. And that's the most exciting experiment of all. In the distance, another Alliance ship descended through the atmosphere, bringing more researchers eager to learn from humanity. Below them, in the center's laboratories, humans and aliens continued working together, pushing the boundaries of both their sciences. They had come to study humanity, but in the end, humanity had taught them something far more valuable, that true strength lies not in perfection, but in the constant drive to improve, to adapt, to reach beyond current limitations. As the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Lyra felt her scales shift to a pattern of pure optimism. The future that lay ahead was uncertain, unpredictable, and full of challenges. In other words, it was exactly the kind of future humans had been preparing for all along. And thanks to them, the Research Alliance would be ready for it too. 5 years after first contact, the Joint Research Center had expanded into a sprawling complex known as Unity City, a shining testament to human-alien cooperation. Commander Lyra, now serving as Chief Ambassador between Earth and the Research Alliance, watched from her office as a new class of hybrid-design spacecraft took its maiden flight. Remarkable, murmured Dr. Sarah Chen, now Director of Interspecies Scientific Development. Human propulsion systems combined with Alliance crystalline technology. We've cut interstellar travel time by 60%. The ship, named Horizon Breaker, represented everything they'd achieved together. Its design incorporated the best of both worlds, human ingenuity and Alliance precision, working in perfect harmony. The latest population surveys are in, First Officer Ven reported, her tentacles dancing across holographic displays. Over 10,000 Alliance members have permanently relocated to Earth, with 5,000 humans now living and working on Alliance worlds. Lyra's scales shifted through patterns of pride and nostalgia. What had begun as a simple research mission had evolved into the greatest cultural exchange in either species' history, but it hadn't all been smooth sailing. Another protest group, forming in Sector 7, Dr. Mira announced, her crystalline structure dimming slightly. They're calling themselves Pure Earth, claiming we're diluting human potential with alien influence. And on Zeron, Dr. Senna added, her feathers rustling, the conservative crystal faction is still pushing for limited contact policies. Sarah smiled. The expression Lyra had learned meant quiet confidence. Show them today's breakthrough. The central display activated, showing footage from their quantum biology lab. A human child born with a genetic disorder was receiving treatment using a combination of Alliance crystal technology and human stem cell research, something neither species could have achieved alone. This is what they don't understand, Sarah explained. We're not diluting either species, we're expanding both our potentials. A sudden alert drew their attention. The Horizon Breaker had detected something unusual at the edge of the solar system, energy signatures that matched neither human nor Alliance patterns. It seems we're not alone in the galaxy after all, Lyra mused, her scales shifting to a pattern of scientific curiosity. Ready to make first contact again. This time, Sarah grinned, we'll do it together from the start. The discovery sparked a flurry of activity throughout Unity City. Human astronomers worked alongside Alliance census specialists, while cultural experts from both species began preparing first contact protocols based on their own successful integration. Look at this, a young human scientist called excitedly. The energy signature, it's completely organic in nature, a biological spacefaring species. Impossible by both our scientific models, an Alliance researcher noted, their crystalline form vibrating with intrigue. But then impossibility is humanity's specialty. Lyra watched as her integrated teams tackled this new challenge with practiced efficiency. Humans provided intuitive leaps and creative approaches, while Alliance members contributed precision and theoretical frameworks. Together, they achieved what neither could alone. Remember when we first arrived? She asked Sarah privately. How we thought humans were primitive because of your biological limitations. Sarah laughed. And now those same limitations are helping us understand a potentially biological spacecraft. Funny how perspectives change. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from the High Council. Councillor Vex's hologram appeared, their crystalline structure showing patterns of excitement rarely seen in Alliance leadership. The conservative crystal faction has withdrawn their opposition, Vex announced. Your latest achievements, particularly this new discovery, have proven the value of integration beyond any doubt. And the Pure Earth movement? Lyra inquired. Losing support daily, Sarah replied. It's hard to argue against progress when it's saving lives and opening up the galaxy. As if to emphasize their point, a group of children ran past their window, human and Alliance youngsters playing together, their differences forgotten in the joy of discovery. The next generation was growing up in a world where cooperation between species was normal, expected, celebrated. We're organizing a joint expedition, Lyra decided, watching the Horizon Breaker return to dock. Human and Alliance crews working together to make first contact with this new species. Learning from both our successes and mistakes, Sarah added, this time we'll skip the whole secret observation phase. The announcement of the joint expedition sparked excitement throughout both cultures. Thousands volunteered, eager to be part of this next great adventure. The selection process itself became another experiment in cooperation, as human and alliance criteria had to be balanced to create the perfect crew. In the end, they chose a team that reflected the best of both worlds, human explorers and alliance researchers, each bringing their unique strengths to the mission. The Horizon Breaker was retrofitted for long-term space exploration, incorporating comfort features for both species. On launch day, Laura stood with Sarah at the command center, watching their shared achievement take flight. The ship's crew, a seamless blend of human and alliance members, worked together with practiced ease, demonstrating how far they'd come. "You know," Sarah said thoughtfully, "when you first revealed yourselves to humanity, there was so much fear, so much uncertainty. People worried we'd lose our identity, our independence. And instead, we found ourselves. All of us, humans, alliance members, were better together than we ever were apart." As the Horizon Breaker disappeared into faster-than-light travel, carrying their combined hopes and dreams to the stars, Laura felt her scales shift to a unique pattern, one that had evolved during her time on Earth, expressing an emotion that had no name in either language, but meant something like joyful anticipation of shared discovery. "We came to study humanity's adaptability," she reflected, "and in the end, that adaptability changed both our worlds for the better." To the future, Sarah raised a ceremonial glass, a human tradition the Alliance had happily adopted. To the future, Lara agreed, her scales glowing with optimism. "And all the impossible things we'll achieve together." Above them, the stars twinkled with promise, no longer representing an insurmountable distance between worlds, but a bridge connecting them. The story that had begun with a simple research mission had evolved into something far greater, a legacy of cooperation, adaptation, and shared discovery that would echo through generations of both species. And somewhere out there, a new chapter was about to begin.